Really appreciate Mark teaching class last week for me. That's been a fun couple weeks, but good to be here. We finished up the Gideon cycle last week, that whole saga. Like I mentioned when I was teaching in chapter 7, I really wish that Gideon's story had ended in chapter 7. That would have been a lot more positive, a lot more of a reversal of what we're expecting as we're going through the book of Judges. Nevertheless, chapter 8 is there. Gideon fails in a lot of ways and brings the people of Israel down, and that's the first time that we see a judge be the downfall of the nation. And that's something that's working as a turning point for us in a lot of ways, because things get a lot worse from here on out. Chapter 9 is pretty strange, because we're not talking about a judge in this chapter. We have a little break from the expectation, and this is where I feel like that Gideon's little ruse that he had about, don't make me a king, I'm not a king, that becomes pretty transparent to me when you look at chapter 9 and how everyone expects that after Gideon has died that his sons are either going to collectively rule or that one of them is going to seize power in some way. It's pretty clear that Gideon was not a king, but acting like a king. And we're going to look up a story of Abimelech today. Abimelech was the next ruler of Israel in a way that's not very positive at all. So question number 1, who is Abimelech and what does he do? Gary.
He was a son, aside from the 70 sons that Gideon had, he was a son born from his concubine.
Yeah, okay. So he is an illegitimate son of Gideon, born of a concubine, excuse me? Yes, of Gideon's slave, Gideon's servant. So among Gideon's sons, he is one with really the least power, the least honor, the one who's not going to be regarded as having the same standing as the rest of them. And Gideon has 70 sons, which is pretty impressive. He says he had many wives, which I think you'd have to have 70 sons. But so Gideon has his harem, so to speak, here, another kind of kingly thing that he's doing in asserting himself as a ruler over Israel. So Gideon had these many wives, but Abimelech's mother is actually his concubine, his servant in that way. So, and don't get tripped up. Remember in chapter 9 when it says Jerubbaal, that's Gideon's other name that he was also known by. So we're still talking about Gideon. So when Gideon has died, there's a void in leadership. Everyone's expecting that somehow we've got to get to a new leader. And with 70 sons, you're going to create an oligarchy pretty quickly, or you're going to have a very bloody mess as we're trying to figure out who's really going to rule. Again, this is not an issue that we saw before Gideon to any reasonable degree. They kind of had their tribal leaderships and they had judges that would lead them. But we don't have these people trying to install themselves as kings. Gideon has really turned things in a very negative direction by his actions. So Abimelech is obviously very bitter. He is looking to establish his power. He's looking to get some sort of honor for himself because he does not have it by virtue of his lineage. And he decides to go to Shechem. And what is he doing in Shechem? Yeah, Dave.
He went to Shechem to convince his family that they should support him as king, and they ended up giving him money to do it. Which I got to wondering why that was. Is that looking through it, there's no hereditary type of lineage automatically. You don't even have to sign.
Right.
The king gets the king.
Yeah.
So the problem with Shechem, the problem with him is that he went there with nefarious reasons. He went there with alternative reasons. He duped them. So they were happy to give them money.
Yeah.
Get him in there. I don't know if they knew about him going to kill his brothers or what, but his half brothers.
Yeah. I think they probably did. And here's basically what Gideon is proposing to his relatives in Shechem. So the people of Shechem are on his mother's side of the family. And so he's going to Shechem and he's telling them, look, with my father dead, there's going to be 70 people who are vying for power. And Dave's right in pointing out, like, why is there this assumption that Gideon's sons are automatically going to have power? Well, that should tell you something about the way Gideon was setting himself up as king. Don't be fooled by the fact that in chapter 8 he said, don't install me as a king. He is acting every bit like a king. He just doesn't want to attach the name to it. And so Abimelech's able to go to his mother's family and to say, is it better for you if you're ruled by 70 sons of Gideon, or if you're ruled by one son of Gideon who also happens to be related to you? It's appealing to their sense of family, their sense of, maybe we'll come out ahead. Gideon or Abimelech has, a vested interest in our success. If we help him, he will help us. This is a chance to get in good with somebody who could have a lot of power. And so he's asking for help and support because there are 70 sons who are all vying for power. He's not very easily going to be able to come out on top of this battle royale or political craziness that's about to happen. He needs some help. And so they give him quite a large sum of money to be able to do that. So they give him 70 pieces of silver. I'm not sure if there's significance to the fact that 70 pieces of silver for 70 sons that he's about to go kill. Maybe that's a going price for hiring a mercenary to kill somebody. But that's exactly what Abimelech does with that money. He goes and hires people to fight with him. And verse 4 tells you what kinds of people they are. They are worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. And I think that's a pretty good description. When you can be bought to go commit violence and evil, well, that makes you pretty worthless and reckless. Okay, so how does it play out then with these mercenaries that Abimelech has hired and going to try to seize power? Gary.
All the brothers were killed except the youngest who hid himself.
Yeah. So Abimelech is very successful at seizing power. He's able to kill all of those 70 brothers except for one. It seems to be a very violent occasion. They're not even really killed in battle. They're captured and then executed all at the same rock. And so it's just one after another being killed. You have to imagine what this scene would look like of 70 people being seized and how many people must have had to have been killed in order for that to even happen, and then brought up one by one to a public place and killed to make a show of Abimelech is in charge now. It's a very bloody scene, a lot of violence, very evil, and it's only scratching the surface of the amount of violence that's going to be in this chapter as a whole. But yes, one son gets away. One son of Gideon is able to hide himself. He's the youngest son. His name is Jotham, and he gets away, and he's going to have a role to play in the events going forward. Okay. Anything else through verse 6 or so? Yes.
Is that 70 sons? So he probably had daughters too.
Yes, probably did have daughters too. they probably would not have been expected to be able to really seize power in any way like that. Doesn't say what happened to them. Probably they got married off to various people, and doesn't say that Abimelech targeted them specifically. But yeah, that's a lot. He had many wives. That is clear. Got the whole harem going. Okay, so Jotham gets away, and he's not content to... Oh, sorry, excuse me. Before we talk about Jotham getting away, after Abimelech has now killed almost all of his half-brothers, he then goes back to Shechem, and they establish him as king. Like, they crown him king. Now, I don't think that this was a very united Israel, and that Abimelech was recognized as king by all the 12 tribes of Israel. I think this is mostly a regional thing where Shechem had some influence. Abimelech could be recognized as king. They've kind of thrown their fortunes in together, right? Abimelech is using Shechem to get the money and the popular support in an area, and Shechem is using Abimelech to try to raise their fortunes in being in with this king who they think is going to be good for them. If you read through chapter 9, you know he is not very good for them at all, but, well, we'll get there. So he is king over some percentage of Israel, and unlike his father, he is content to actually call himself king. He's not going to play this game of, oh, I'm not king, just send me all of your offerings and your gold, and no, he is king, and he is happy to call himself king. Yeah, Mark.
It's important to note that he's not anointed. He's not anointed king. God, this is not God saying, telling one of the priests or a prophet, you go make this guy king. He makes himself.
Oh yeah, yes. Abimelech is not approved by God in anything that he does in any of this. He is not an anointed king, not called by God for any of this. This is, like I wrote in the little summary email I sent out yesterday, this is an opportunistic man who committed a lot of evil and violence to seize power for what ultimately ends up being like 3 years. So it's a whole bloody rampage, all for just a few short breaths of power. So Jotham, oh, excuse me, Dave? No, sorry. See a corner of my eye here. Okay, so Jotham gets away, and he's not content to just hide. He's got to say his piece. And in fact, it seems he's actually called by God to deliver some message to the people of Shechem, and to give some condemnation and a bit of a prophecy of what is going to happen with all of this. So the parable that Jotham tells is an unusual one. It's a parable about some trees that go to anoint a king over them, as trees do. So, I'm supposed to laugh, it's a joke. Okay, so the trees go and anoint a king over them. And first they go to the olive tree and they say, reign over us. And the olive tree says, shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored and go hold sway over the trees? He's not interested in being king. And so the trees go to the fig tree and say, come and reign over us. And the fig tree basically answers the same way. Shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go hold sway over the trees? And then the trees go on to the vine and they say, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine that cheers God and men and go hold sway over the trees? So the trees have gone to three trees, three very important and valuable trees that Israel would use and would get a lot of produce from. And they have tried to install each of them as king, but unsuccessfully. They have no interest in being king over the trees. And then they go and ask the bramble, or your translation may say the thorn bush. And they say, you come and reign over us. And the bramble says to them, if in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. All right, so who wants to make a stab at interpreting that for us? Excuse me?
In a way, he was threatening them.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a threat involved here. The if you have come in good faith is pretty bitingly sarcastic, and so the end result of this is you're supposed to expect that the fire will come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon.
Isn't it later called a curse? That he actually called this curse down upon them, that it was
Yeah.
something that would be fulfilled?
Right. This is later called a curse, and that's kind of what we're getting at here, that, he says if in the parable, but like this has already happened. The bramble has already been anointed king, and so this is a curse. This is a prophecy in a way of what is going to happen. What else about this? Yeah, Dave.
Kind of at least for me, it's kind of a ironic illustration of the bramble.
Mhm.
He says, basically, he's saying it's a threat. Come and be under my shade. Well, you ever been in a bramble bush? There's no shade under a bramble.
Yeah.
It's a false promise. And he says, if you don't, then fire's I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
Basically, you're going to die.
Yeah.
So it's a total threat.
Yeah.
So either do it or die.
Yeah. You're onto something here, because there's some absurdity involved in this. Like, don't take for granted, but the bramble is saying, come and rest under my shade. Have you ever taken shade in a thorn bush before? Why would anybody try to do that? Why would a tree try to get shade under a thorn bush, and what would that even accomplish if you did it? Mark?
Abimelech's the thorn bush.
Yeah.
And he seems to be indicating that you had some better choices, some true choices that could have ruled over you. The fig tree and the olive tree, which were productive. But even, when you go in, what you said earlier, this goes back to Gideon, who may have been considered something productive.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to rule. He doesn't want to rule. And I think that started the big problem. You indicated that started this big problem of not looking to continue being a judge, not necessarily a king, but just looking to God,
Yeah.
doing what God says, and and he stops, and that just starts the entire process of everything falling apart.
Yeah.
You also indicated he has the harem. He has the things that the king gets.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want the responsibility.
Right, yeah. So if Abimelech is the bramble, which is the correct interpretation there, then, we're kind of left to ask, who are the other trees, the olive tree, the fig tree, the vine, and there's not anybody in particular, not any specific person who's being identified, but the general idea, as Mark has said, that there are many better people than Abimelech who actually provide some value to society, who actually are something good for Israel, who would be better as king over the nation. At the same time, I think there's an implication here, but those people, because they are good and productive, and because they are not mindlessly seeking power, that they wouldn't accept it if it was offered to them. Because they would know better than to try to establish themselves as king. And so only in this case, at a time when Israel is not supposed to have a king, there's nothing that says they should have a king, and not anointed by God, that the only kind of person who's going to put themselves up as king is the exact last person that you'd want to be there. And that's the implication here. So the parable is accomplishing a few things for us. One, Abimelech is a worthless leader, and he is not going to do anything good for the nation. And secondly, there is some impossibility to what they think is going to happen. They think that Abimelech is going to improve their lives. Particularly the people of Shechem think that they will find rest and shade in the shade of Abimelech's glory, but they will not. And their attempt to do that means that instead they will be consumed by fire that comes out of the bramble. That's another impossible thing, right? Brambles don't spit fire, the last that I've seen. And that is foreshadowing the fact that God is going to turn Abimelech and Shechem against each other. And they're going to end up basically devouring each other. And by the end of this chapter, both will be far worse off than they started. They did things not God's way. They did things in a very selfish way, and it's going to cause them a lot of pain. There's also this idea, the bramble says, if in good faith you are anointing me as king over you. Why specifically say it that way? Are they not anointing Abimelech in good faith? Gary?
Well, God wasn't involved at all, that's for sure.
Yeah. So there's something there that this is not something led by God or approved by God. You know, why do the people of Shechem specifically want Abimelech to be king?
It's part of the family.
Part of the family. It's as simple as that. Not that they believe he's going to be a good king, not that he's really the most qualified person for the job, not because he fears God and has leadership skills, but simply because they think they can get something out of it. So this is not in good faith, and we'll see some more of that a bit more as we go down. So verse 16, Jotham makes this parable more explicit and makes sure that they know the correct interpretation of this. He says, now therefore, if you acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian, then you have risen up against my father's house this day and have killed his sons, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the leaders of Shechem, because he is your relative. If you then have acted in good faith and integrity with Jerubbaal and his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo. And let fire come out from the leaders of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. So, yeah, this is very explicit here. And I want to hone in on something for a moment. It's this particular phrase that we've seen a couple times now. If you acted in good faith and integrity, in verse 16, and then 19 again, if you then have acted in good faith and integrity. There's a little bit of wordplay involved that we might miss. So Jotham's name literally is a compound word combining the short form of Yahweh's name, the Yah, and then the word for integrity or perfection or blameless or honesty, those sorts of ideas. So literally Jotham's name means Yahweh is blameless. Yahweh has integrity. Yahweh is perfect. So by virtue of his very own name, and then what he's asking them, if you have acted with integrity, if you have acted with good faith, then, well, more power to you. He's drawing a contrast already. He's getting them to try to remember that God has always acted with integrity. God is doing what he's supposed to do while they are not. And clearly, they are not acting in integrity, because verse 20 is that curse. Let fire come out from that bramble, from Abimelech, and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo. And then he adds in the extra piece that we didn't see in the actual parable. The trees are going to send fire out as well and devour the bramble. It's going to go both ways, and that is exactly what we're going to see as the story progresses. So Jotham runs away. There's no safety for him here. The men of Shechem still want him dead, and he is having to go into hiding, basically just to live. Okay, so question number 3. We see that Abimelech is ruling for the next 3 years over some part of Israel. He is kind of in a weird place in the narrative of this book because he's not a judge, obviously. He's not one of the foreign oppressors either. But he is an oppressor in a lot of ways. He's an oppressor from among them. He's creating a lot of problems and a lot of evil, within the nation. He is one of them, but he's this source of bloodshed and evil. So question number 3, what did God do? Sent a spirit of ill will. Yes, okay. Between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. So they were the allies, they were the friends who bonded over this ability to try to empower Abimelech and to try to raise the fortunes of Shechem. They've accomplished some things together, but God has sent a spirit of ill will in between them to where they are not going to cooperate with each other anymore. They're not going to be getting along. So this is direct involvement by God to ruin this relationship as a punishment for both of them. And all the events that we see coming after this are because of this newfound hatred between the two.
I'm thoroughly puzzled by this right here. God had to send 3 years later, 3 years
Yeah.
later, he sent this spirit of ill will to they would remember that Abimelech killed their brothers. Okay. If I killed your brother, would you have ill will towards me? Probably so. I would. We all know from reading this that they're not looking to God for anything,
Yeah.
at all. Why didn't they have that ill will? Why didn't they went ahead and accept him as king? I'm really puzzled by that one. The family just, turned their eyes away from it.
Well, he has eliminated the family on his father's side. It's sending the ill will to the mother's side here. And they were complicit. I mean, they were directly involved in this, more than complicit in it. They funded this. They wanted this to happen. They wanted Abimelech's brothers to be killed because they're, some other family. They're not part of their own family. Abimelech's the only one they have a particular family relationship with. And the point was, if we can kill off the rest of them, then Abimelech will be so powerful, and then he's going to elevate us as well. So they accept this because it's good for them, so they think. They accept it because they have gotten what they wanted. They're playing the old political game that has happened for as long as there have been people, and happens still today, that it doesn't matter what my guy does, it doesn't matter what kind of evil he commits, so long as it benefits me. And that's exactly what they are content with for so long. Abimelech has committed great evil and great violence, but he's their guy. And so they're happy to see him prosper. Until God sends this evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. Now they're not getting along. Even though they have worked together, even though they have accomplished something together, they don't trust each other, and there is hatred and anger between them, and they're going to now create some more problems going forward. And God is doing this to avenge the blood of these 70 sons who were killed, the 70 brothers of Abimelech. That's not going to go unpunished, is the idea here. To one other point, I'm not completely sure if verse 22, in saying but he ruled 3 years, is specifically saying that he ruled 3 years and then the evil spirit came between them, or if that's meant to be a summary statement. He ruled for 3 years, Now let's talk about what happened in those 3 years. I'm kind of inclined to think it might be the latter. That happens a lot in these historical narratives where it gives a little summary statement early about the number of years that they were. It's the same way we might say, such and such president was president over America for 4 years. And then you start talking about what he did as president at the beginning. It doesn't mean all 4 years happened and then those events happened. It means that you're giving the span of time first and then starting to go through some events. So I think that is probably what's happening here, that it wasn't the whole 3 years that passed, and then actually all of these events are within those 3 years. Okay. So God has intervened in the relationship here. These allies have become enemies. What do the people of Shechem do to start interfering with Abimelech's rule? Gary.
They started robbing people. I got the idea, instead of calling out, they were robbing, setting ambush on the tops of the mountains. They robbed all of them, passed by, and it was told Abimelech. I get the idea that it's money that would have gone to Abimelech. He was losing resources from these guys that were robbing people and trying to get riches to him, is the way I picture it.
Yeah, so I think that is quite possibly at least part of it there, that it's interfering with things that are supposed to be going to Abimelech. I think there's also a piece of this that's probably just generally sowing chaos. That Abimelech is not going to be well liked if the people don't feel safe, and so let's just elevate the crime, elevate the danger, and even in the place where he's supposed to have the most support, now that has become a dangerous place that Abimelech doesn't have control over. What does that say about his reign as king? What does that say about his ability to keep his people safe? This is a way of undermining him and probably also robbing Abimelech indirectly of things that were supposed to be going to him. Either way, we have chaos coming into the nation and a lot of problem and evil that is developing. So, who is Gaul and what does he do? Son of Ebed. He, when you read what Gaul is doing, this starts sounding a lot like the story of Abimelech at the beginning, doesn't it? Because Gaul, the son of Ebed, moves into Shechem with his relatives, and the leaders of Shechem put confidence in him. He's Abimelech 2.0, okay? That's exactly what he is. He's another opportunist who's coming to this city and looking to get some support and trying to establish power for himself. What you need to understand about this is this was a very dangerous and unstable time. That Abimelech has seized power, but he doesn't have it firmly in his grasp. There are a lot of problems. There are other people who are trying to take that power from him. He doesn't have power over all of Israel, almost certainly. This is more of a regional thing, but even the region that supports him is no longer supporting him, and there's another opportunist who's trying to usurp him. Mark?
Just a couple of quick notes. The word for that they use for his rule is kind of a chief. It's more of a prince.
Yeah.
Like when you read about King David, that means king.
Yeah.
And the word they use here is kind of like a prince or just a chief guy.
Yeah.
So God does not recognize him as a king.
No.
They call him that.
Yeah.
And he uses the same rhetoric that Abimelech does, because Abimelech is not a full brother. He's a half brother.
Mm-hmm.
And Gaal is saying, I'm a full-on guy.
Yeah.
I'm full on related to you guys. I'm the guy. And it uses the same language.
Yeah. And it works, again. Like, that's the, God has clearly interfered in the relationship between Shechem and Abimelech. Because, like, the same thing is working all over again. They've got their guy, but they're now ditching their guy for a new guy. That's what is happening here. And this is going to create even more violence, even more trouble. So the leaders of Shechem have put their confidence in him. Gaul's a popular guy in Shechem these days. And they go out into the field, they gathered grapes from their vineyards, they trod them and held a festival. They go into the house of their God, they're eating and drinking, and they're bonding over their mutual hatred of Abimelech. I'm imagining a bunch of raucous partiers who are all having a great time, enjoying themselves, and talking about what a sorry loser Abimelech is. Sounds like a great party. And at this festival, at this party, Gaul says, "Who is Abimelech? And who are we of Shechem that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? Would that this people were under my hand. Then I would remove Abimelech. I would say to Abimelech, increase your army and come out." Yeah, he can talk a big game. If I were in charge, things would be so much better. If I were in charge, you would be more successful too, because look, I'm related to you even more closely than Abimelech is. And has Abimelech been very good to you? Not as good as you hoped. I would be good to you. I would remove Abimelech, and I would be a great leader. Yeah. And he's talking very boastfully as well. He would tell Abimelech, "Oh, go raise up however much of an army you want and then come fight me, because I can take you." Like this machismo going on. Now Zebul, the ruler of the city, hears about this, and he's very angry. He seems to be a supporter of Abimelech, even through all of this. And so he secretly sends messengers over to Abimelech to let him know what's going on, that there's a conspiracy against him and somebody trying to seize power. And so he recommends that Abimelech should secretly get people together and should surround the city and then rush in as soon as the morning light dawns. And then as he rushes in, that he'll be able to seize Gaul and put an end to this. And Abimelech takes that advice, starting in verse 34. They set up 4 different companies of men. They set an ambush against Shechem. And they're coming to the gate of the city, ready to do exactly as Zebul has said. Now, Gaul is apparently looking outwards, and he sees a bunch of people coming down from the mountaintops. That doesn't seem like a good thing. And he says, "Look, there's a bunch of people coming down from the mountaintops." And Zebul says, "Oh no, that's just a shadow of the mountains." I'm not sure how that was ever supposed to work. A shadow of the mountains looking like, armies. I guess they're in the distance, and it's hard to tell exactly what you're looking at. But Gaul is not convinced by this. Like he's seen men come down the mountainside, and as they get closer, it is very obvious these are not shadows. These are men. And you got to remember as well, right? This is all like just at daybreak, so there's not a lot of light involved. But as you get some more light, and as the men get closer, it becomes evident that yes, there is an attack. And so Gaul is able to specifically say, "No, look, they're coming down right here, and they're coming down over there." And Zebul realizes the ambush isn't much of an ambush anymore, and so he tells him, "Where is your mouth now?" Which I love that. I love that so much. Where is your mouth now? He said, you said you'd go fight Abimelech. Well, there he is. Go fight him. And go see if you can win. And there's a big battle. Gaul and Abimelech come out. They're fighting. Many people fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. and Zebul drives Gaul and his supporters out of the city of Shechem so that they can't take refuge there anymore. So Abimelech continues. He presses forward. He is, even though Gaul has been removed as a threat, he doesn't have the same number of supporters that he had before. He goes on to punish Shechem anyway. And this is kind of ironic to me because Shechem has actually kind of supported him here. Zebul has thrust out Gaul. They're now not harboring him anymore. They're now not supporting him anymore. But he's going to punish Shechem anyway. And so he invades the city. But before he invades the city, specifically what he does is he waits outside. And the common people are coming out into the fields, getting ready to work. And this is not warriors, not soldiers coming out to fight. Not even just men. The generic term people means that you've got men and women. These are people going out to work in the fields. These are people going to work, going about their day. And Abimelech ambushes them, and he slaughters them. He slaughters a lot of people who were not there to fight him and who were not prepared to fight, were just going to work. This is a pretty evil and violent thing that he has done. And then he advances into the city. He captures it. He kills a lot more people inside. He razes the whole city to the ground, and he sows it with salt. The idea being that nobody will ever be able to grow crops there again. You've sown it with salt, so it's now worthless land. So Abimelech has just kind of let his violence and evil overflow, killing everybody in sight. But somehow, it gets worse. Question 5, what does Abimelech then try to do? Because, in my mind, he's won here. He's had too much of a victory, and that he's been able to kill his enemies and to be able to make a statement, make the point. What does he do after this?
Goes to another place.
Yeah, on to the next city. Now, hold on, Abimelech. Are you king or are you an invading army? This is getting harder and harder to understand. He's just continuing the bloodthirsty rampage. And so he goes even farther. More people have retreated into the temple stronghold of Beth Millo there. And Abimelech has now commanded his men to stack brush and wood up against this temple stronghold and to set it on fire. And they do that, and everybody inside dies. It's about 1,000 people who die. And then, what does he do after that?
Tries to do that again.
On to the next place. Again, acting more like an oppressor and an invading army than any kind of leader over his people. This is bizarre. And so he's on to the next city. And they take refuge in their tower, and he's ready to do the same thing. They're getting ready to stack up wood and brush up against this tower. We're going to burn it down. And how does this very abruptly come to an end?
A woman drops a rock on his head.
A woman drops a rock on his head. And it's over. Just like that.
But he doesn't want his history to say that a woman
Yeah.
killed him, so he has his shield bearer or whatever running through.
Yeah, so, his skull is crushed, and he's clearly dying, and so he tells his armor bearer, says, kill me so that I'm not remembered as a person who was killed by a woman. He is remembered as a person who was killed by a woman anyway, not only here, but even later on in 1 Samuel or 2 Samuel, wherever that is, 2 Samuel 11. He's remembered that way, so he gets no honor out of this.
God made sure he...
Yeah, God makes sure. Abimelech is so concerned with his image and his power, his honor, and he gets a 3-year bloody rampage and then a dishonorable death. And just like that, everybody goes back to their homes, and it's all over. So the kingdom of Abimelech didn't last real long, didn't accomplish very much. The message here, what God has done is he has punished Abimelech and Shechem for the evil that they started. Because they worked together to kill a lot of people who didn't deserve to be killed, God set them against each other, and they both ended up much worse off than the way they started. Abimelech died in dishonor. Shechem was destroyed and had many people killed. They're obliterated into nothing. God has punished them for the evil that they have worked. And he did it basically just by turning them against each other, letting them use their own attitude, their own evil, their own sin, and just directing it at each other instead of at other people. And there are consequences to their actions. It kind of reminds me of how it says that God, even today, lets sinful people kind of suffer the consequences of their own decisions, right? That they let them be consumed by their own actions. Sometimes the punishment that we get is just exactly what we asked for. No more, no less. So the curse of Jotham came true. The bramble consumed the trees, and the trees consumed the bramble, and it was all over. And this weird side story of Judges is over, with not a whole lot to say for it. Thank you, everyone. Next week we'll go on to chapter 10.